Hello, my name is Maria Helena Carey, and I write for a blog called The Hill is Home. And today I have two guests. Julie, would you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, my name is Julie Aronson, and I'm the Executive Director of CHAMPS, the Capitol Hill Association of Merchants and Professionals.
Okay, and today we have Christina Henderson. Christina, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yes, my name is Christina Henderson. I am a proud Ward 4 resident, and I am a candidate for DC Council at Large.
Well, thank you. So first of all, thank you so much for sitting down with us. We have a few questions for you because the at-large field is quite large this year.
Oh, yes.
Yes, and so actually, my first question is that one. In such a crowded field of candidates, how do you plan to stand out? Do so many candidates for at-large give better known names an unfair advantage, do you think?
Yeah, no. So again, thank you so much for the invitation and joining. It's so funny. I tell people like the at-large seat right now is like the hottest ticket in town now that the primary is over.
Absolutely.
A lot of people who are engaged in this race and who are interested in running. And I'm running because I believe we need a more equitable DC. We need more council members who are focused in on policies that are going to make DC more equitable and sustainable for us all. And I'm not intimidated by the number of candidates in the race because I actually do believe that I'm the best candidate to move forward for this seat. I feel like experience is important. And for 5 years, I had the pleasure and honor of serving district residents. First, I was Councilmember David Grasso's first legislative director. And then when he became chair of the Committee on Education, I was the committee director for 2 years. And prior to that, I worked for DC Public Schools. And I feel like that level of experience, I've written over 40 bills that are currently law in the District of Columbia, which I don't feel like a lot of candidates can say. And so I feel like I have a message and a track record of success and being able to proactively move policies forward for the district. And I believe that will resonate with voters in the end.
Okay, well, thank you. So just to follow up on that, well, each ward council office handles constituent services inside their geographic area. You know, we have 8, and then we have 5 more that are the at-large seats. So how do you see an at-large office as more than just a backup for citizens when they're having a hard time reaching their own ward council number? And how would you raise the profile of your office to help all Washingtonians?
Yeah, I view the council, the at-large council members, in this unique role of being able to collaborate with ward council members because, from my experience working at the council, I think sometimes ward council members feel like they're on this island of their own, right? They're the only ones who are fighting for their schools or, the transportation in their area or the housing in their area. And I actually don't feel like that's a great approach because as an at-large council member, you are responsible for all, right? All constituents in the entire city are part of it. And I feel like my approach to leadership and my approach to policymaking is always one of collaboration, bringing in the voices, because I don't call myself an expert in every issue. And so that's what I'm also excited about doing is like, I have a mixed range of experience and background working in the national level, working in the local level, but local politics, the saying all politics are local, it's absolutely true in this regard. And working in local politics was some of the most passionate work I did, because the idea of your neighbors coming to you with an issue, you get to research it, you look a little further in terms of solutions, and then you're able to craft something and then see it implemented on the other side, which is not something you often get on the national side. And so I view the relationship as one of collaboration and not as a backup, right? If a constituent has an issue, in Ward 6 or whatnot, you could call Charles Allen or you could call me. It doesn't matter. But my hope is that for my office, we would work in collaboration so that we're not stepping on toes in the work.
Wonderful. Okay, Julie, I'm turning it over to you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Christina, for being with us. A common concern of CHAMPS members is that it's hard to do business in DC. Licensing is hard, the bureaucracy is slow, and the agency databases don't talk to each other. How will you engage the small business community to understand our needs? And how will you foster responsiveness by the regulatory agencies to our small business concerns?
Yeah. this is like one of those issues that I hear all the time. And it was an issue when I was a staffer in DC government, right? You know, DCRA is this mammoth, Department of Employment Services is this mammoth. And, you know, I view our businesses in the city as a true stakeholder in the work that we're doing. So, you know, when we look at how the DC generates its revenue, a large portion of it is coming from our businesses in the city. And as such, I feel like they need to be at the table as we're making policies to move forward, but also so we could truly understand how what we're doing, while it might seem modest or innocuous, how it really is impacting the day-to-day work of a business. You know, we look at what happened with COVID-19. Lots of businesses in the city are hurting, right? Restaurants, childcare centers, the cleaners, right? Nobody is, I don't know about you, but my dry cleaning budget for the we're doing a lot of t-shirts and shorts in my house, right? And so
the point too.
yeah, and so I feel like we really, as council members, need to have conversations with the stakeholders about what's working, what's not working, and also what are your needs, and how can we best ensure that you can be successful and keep your business going, because all of the estimates that we see around what is going to happen is devastating. You know, quarter of the restaurants might not stay open. 40% of childcare centers might close permanently. You know, what are we doing towards that? And as far as working with the agencies on the regulatory side, you know, when I talk to voters, for many of them, it's not necessarily wanting to see new policies or new initiatives. They really want the services that we currently have in the district just to work well, right? I want I want to be able to drive down my street and not get a pothole, or like, you know, not bust my tire every time I hit a pothole. I want my streets not to flood every time it rains outside. When I call DCRA, I want someone to answer and not have to follow up 5 and 6 times just to get a permit for, you know, a simple modification to my home. And so one of the things that I'm excited about on the council is to get back to doing proactive oversight. I feel like for a lot of council members, we get into this rut, or they've gotten into this rut of like, we only do oversight when something goes wrong, or the one time of year that we're required to do it with performance oversight. And I've learned from my experience working with our DC government agencies, both on the agency side and then also the council side, persistent and consistent proactive oversight is how you ensure that things are running smoothly. And I just feel like it's a check, right? It's a check and balance in how we have our democracy in our system. And so I feel like DCRA is one of those agencies that needs some persistent and consistent oversight to ensure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And to be honest, I feel like we need that type of oversight before we put more regulations in place that we're asking businesses to, you know, adhere to, but we don't have our agencies able to do either the enforcement or provide the technical assistance and help to small businesses to meet their compliance and obligations.
Right. Well, I'm glad you mentioned COVID, because right now, while businesses are reopening in phase 2, some of those businesses, sales, as you alluded to, sales for many of the storefront retailers and the restaurants have dropped, even as much as 40% or more from this time last year. And there was a lot of ground that was lost from tourism in the spring as well. And the fixed costs of taxes, of rent, are still due, and businesses have already spent their Paycheck Protection Program funds, their DC microgrant funds, and as you said, many businesses may be forced to close. So if you were on the council right now, what are the proposals that you would be putting forward? And as they're looking at the budget, what would you put forward to help our small businesses continue to operate and employ those district residents?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when you look at what has been going on and what is happening, I think the federal government is going to provide some relief, but I feel like we shouldn't rely on that. I feel like DC government really has to step up here and provide funding and opportunities of stabilization across our business community. So whether that's increasing funding for the micro grants or formulating our own type of paycheck protection program locally, with funding really geared towards helping with some of those fixed costs that you talked about. So rent, utilities, and those kinds of things. Because if we can lessen that burden, I think that it might give some of our businesses more of a fighting chance to weather the storm and survive in this moment. But, I have it's going to be difficult. And I just feel like we need to have a real conversation in terms of, okay, small businesses, what do you need? As opposed to council members just thinking that they know. Because like I said, I'm not an expert in running a small business. I had like a babysitting business when I was like 10, but that is certainly not, what we're talking about here. And so I just feel like, collaboration is important, communication, and then also what are the common sense approaches that are innovative that we can come up with to provide support as best we can for our businesses. Because if we want to recover, if we want to come back, I'm not going to say back to normal because normal wasn't working for a lot of people. So if we want to be back to better, we need to have those conversations to lay the groundwork and foundation to help, our businesses get through this moment.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
I'll touch on another point. Residential versus commercial parking on Capitol.
Oh no, that's like the third rail.
It is the third rail. It is the third rail, which is why we have to ask about it. And it is in many DC neighborhoods. And so you, as a candidate, face this in all of the neighborhoods. How to balance the parking among the residents, among the customers, business owners, and employees is an age-old question. So where parking is in high demand, employees and DC service providers, for example, DC businesses that provide services just absorb those parking tickets. And that's unfair. They absorb those parking tickets as part of their work. How would you approach this problem and kind of what's your rationale behind that?
Oh man, parking. Parking is one of those.
Big one.
I feel like
polarizing.
What's that?
I'm just saying it's big and it's polarizing.
Oh yes, for sure. And so yeah, I live in Ward 4 now, but before we moved to 4, we lived in 5, and then before that, we lived in more high traffic areas. So we lived in Shaw, right on 7th Street, near the Howard Metro, and then before that, I lived in Southwest by the waterfront. So like
lived this.
Very, very close to the wharf. So this parking issue, been there as a visitor, as a resident, and those kinds of things. And, honestly, I think, again, this is around conversations with communities around the realities and how we move forward. But to be honest, I think that, parking, it can't be a conversation in a silo. We also need to talk about parking in relation to how we're improving public transportation methods. If we had, let's say, a streetcar that worked better, you might have people who didn't need to drive down to 8th Street and park in neighborhoods and do that thing. If we had a more reliable bus system with more connectivity, if we had more protected bike lanes, if we had all of these other pieces, I think we can reduce the number of people who feel like they have to rely on their own personal vehicle to get around. And I think especially when we're talking about COVID, as we were talking about earlier, right? Like we can't afford for everyone to go back to driving their own car in the city. We don't have the space. We don't have the parking space, for that. But thinking just like congestion, the accidents, all of these, how are we having a conversation about this that moves it from a third rail issue where it's like new residents versus, people who have been here or seniors or those kinds of things? I think it just needs to be a very practical conversation. If you're going to take away parking, what else are you giving me as an alternative, method? And we've never, well, at least, in my experience, we talk about the issue in a silo as opposed to talking about it, together. But, as someone who, that's always a thing when I go on Capitol Hill, I'm like, okay, am I going to be able to find parking today? Or, when you stand at the signs that sometimes are conflicting and you're like, okay.
Like 2 hours parking that way, but no parking anytime. And then, you can park here, loading zone. Yeah.
I mean, I have friends of mine who they say they have a parking ticket budget very similarly to businesses where they're like, you know what, I'm 10 minutes late. I'm just going to pull into this space and hope that it works out. But if not,
$50 later on.
right.
Yeah. I won't ask about loading zones.
No, not
Another time.
like that's a follow-up right there, because it's like that's the fourth rail.
Also, it's just so hard, I think, in Ward 6 in particular, where, you know, the streets are, you don't really have wide alleys. There are just so many different things that make it much more difficult for the businesses, particularly from the loading and unloading perspective.
I am thinking right now as we're speaking about the 400 block of 8th Street Southeast, right there at the Starbucks, where there's the fire station across the street, and there is the loading zone, there is the bus, and it's like the circulator, the 90, the 92, and all of the people making the Uber deliveries. And, you know, just this conversation is just giving me that kind of a feel right here.
Yeah. I mean, but honestly, I think you have to have the conversation around, like, can we have 4 or 5 different modes of transportation happening on the same road?
Yeah.
You know, right? Like, so I'll leave it there.
Okay. Well, so we're just going to move into our final and very silly question. There's been a lot of talk that the Washington football team is going to get a new name. So what would you name them? And do you support a return to RFK?
Oh my gosh. Well, I support the name change. I think this is long overdue. And I have to say, count me among, I was one of the skeptics because Dan Snyder had been so entrenched of like, I will never change the name, you know, put that in capital letters. But I think this moment goes to show that, you know, being persistent, protest and advocacy and activism can move things that seem like they're impossible. In terms of names, like, you know, I would love to see something that's honoring history. You know, I've heard like the Washington Red Tails to honor, you know, the Tuskegee Airmen. Of course, there are people who have like lots of funny sort of innuendos in terms of plays off of DC. Politics in general.
I've heard.
The what now?
The Washington Half Smokes.
Oh, yeah. I don't know about that, to name the team after a food. But I'm excited to see what they come up with and, you know, hopefully allowing an entirely new generation of people to fall in love with a team or to actually engage in that team, because there are a lot of folks that are just like, you know,
and should they engage from RFK or should we leave them in Landover?
I am not the one. I tried to be very clear with people. Changing the name, in my opinion, does not automatically mean a new stadium. I feel like DC has a lot of other needs for that land, whether it be housing, recreational activities, like the parks that we currently have down there. But, you know, seas of parking lots for a football stadium that will only have 8 games in a season is just not appealing. And I feel like if we're talking about a taxpayer-funded stadium, we just have too many other priorities and too many other needs as a city right now. I feel like this is one of those issues where, you know, I hope your viewers definitely pay attention to, because you know, sometimes people don't talk about the stadium issue in terms of its relationship with Congress, right? So like DC has to get it, you know, has to acquire the land from the federal government first. And, you know, I'm kind of, I'm not nervous, but I feel like there might be shenanigans at play. And so I just encourage people to pay attention to the appropriations process that happens, you know, on the federal side, because if there is language that says the stadium can only be used, or the land can only be used for a stadium or for entertainment purposes, that locks the city in. And I don't feel like it's appropriate for Congress to be making that decision on behalf of district residents in terms of land use going forward. So I'm sure it's going to be a debate. It's one that I welcome. But, you know, when people say, oh, well, we'll have concerts there and we'll have all these other things. Like, let's look around.
Yeah.
We don't have any concerts going on at this moment, and we won't have any concerts for quite some time, but we also have a lot of other fantastic venues. Nats Stadium, Audi Fields, you know, you have Capital One, you have Anthem. There's just like a lot going on, and I just feel like we have a better use for that property over there. And activating that part of the waterfront would be really, really exciting for the city and for that neighborhood that lives over there.
All righty. Great. Well, thank you so much for all of your great answers. Thank you for this conversation. Julie?
Yes, thank you very much. It's been a great opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you guys so much for having me. And if people are looking for more information about me, check out my website at ChristinaHenderson.org. In November, you'll have an opportunity to vote for 2 at-large council members, and I hope that I can be one.
Wonderful. And I'll make sure to include your links on YouTube, and this will be available on YouTube and on Instagram Live. Thank you so much.
Thank you.